Okay guys, pretty common on this, small accounts. How do you trade a small account? Well, do you know what? Small account is subjective. If you are someone who's got 50, 60 million in the bank, then 100 grand might be a small account for you. If you're someone who's got 20 grand in the bank, then it's going to be £1,000, £2,000 account. So I'm not going to talk numbers here because one man's small account is another man's large account. It's all dependent on your net worth, all these kind of things. So I'm not going to put numbers up there because I don't want to make anyone feel inferior, or I don't want to make anyone think, hang on, that's not smart, that's not small. So both sides of the coin there. And by the way, just a caveat to that, talking about inferiority, do not let anybody tell you you can't trade with whatever size money you've got. You know, there are instances where people have taken very small accounts and made them into very large accounts by being very skillful, and there are people who have taken very large accounts and gone broke. So never go with or never judge someone by the size of their trading account, because there are some people out there who have large trading accounts who are destined to blow up. There are people out there who have got small trading accounts who are doing very nicely and are growing it very well. So forget about the numbers, you focus on the game, focus on what you're trading, focus on becoming a better digrader. And actually, I'm going to digress very slightly. I know a guy who had a very successful business. He sold his business, he made several million, he stuck most of it in a trading account, and he lost it all. He lost it all because he assumed he could do it as easily as he could. I recognise that he spent a lot of time and effort into his business, a lot of hard work, but he assumed that the more work he put in and the more effort and the more learning would equal better trading profits, which isn't actually the case. You know, there's some skill that you have to develop, there's other mindsets you have to adjust and all these kind of things. He unfortunately didn't do that, and he lost all his money, and he then had to go back and get a job. So all that time he made building the business and selling it was gone in the market, which is a bit of a sad story. But on the flip side, you know, I know people who started out with 1,000 then turned it into $250,000 very, very quickly. So, you know, it works both ways, guys. So let's not talk about numbers, let's talk about strategy. So small accounts, treat it like a large account. That's the best thing I've got for you. Even if it is a small amount of money, treat it as if it's a large amount of money. Because if you're doing it properly, that is how you're going to make money over time. Now, the one thing that people say to you is, hey, you know what? You should only risk 1%. You should only risk 2% of your trade. And you know what? That makes perfect sense if you're looking to grow if you're looking to grow slowly. It makes perfect sense if you're starting out in the game to risk a very small amount to generate your strategies, your risk management, to find out the type of trader you are, to find out the type of markets you want to trade, to find out all those things that you need to do as a beginner. For the first few years, it makes perfect sense to do that. Once you've proven to yourself that you can trade and that you're making money, 1 or 2% isn't going to cut it. I'm going to be honest with you, it's not worth the risk. If you're making 1 or 2% per trade, you're not going to be making money on every trade. Maybe you're making money 6 out of 10 times, 7 out of 10 times if you're really good. The net of that means you're not going to be growing that much. And on a small account, anything, again, I don't really talk about numbers, but you can probably work it out in your own head. You can work out a percentage gain you're going to get from your size account if you were doing that consistency. And that's just assuming you were consistent enough to make, you know, 70% of your trades work and you're making 1% on each trade, doing it every month. It doesn't make to be a lot of money considering the amount of risk you're taking. At some point, and by the way, just to clarify here, this is not advice, this is just purely me talking and giving an account of how I've done it and how I know other people have done it. At some point, you are going to have to take some bigger risk. If you want to grow that small account into a big account, if you want to turn that whatever number into a number that's many multiples, that you're going to have to dial some risk. Now that does not mean suddenly taking 10% risk on each trade. Now that's one way of doing it, but of course 10 trades you're going to wipe out. If you're getting 7 out of 10 right, it only takes, you know, a couple of normal months really, and of struggle, and you're going to be halving your account down to a quarter of the size. So the important thing is risk. When do you take more risk? You take more risk when the market conditions are right, when you're trading well, when you've got some profit and you can play with that profit. Now, some people might say, hey, playing with profit, it's not, you know, it's your money, it's not house money, all this. I'm not pretending it's house money. All I'm saying is when you've made some money, you can then afford to take more risk with that money. So what do I mean? Let's say, for example, you're making, again, really want to don't use numbers. So let's say you've made X on the trade. Okay, you've made X on the trade. The next trade, instead of risking X, why don't you risk 2X? So if that trade works for you, then why don't you next trade you risk 3X? You're ultimately only risking the same amount, because the first trade you had, you risked X, you made X. 2X, you're risking the profits from that and your initial X. Next one, 3X and X. And then perhaps the market conditions stop. So you back off a little bit and you put that to one side. Next time that comes around and you feel you've got a trade that's working well for you, a setup that's working well for you, whatever it may be, you're risking 4X. And before you know it, now you're starting to talk decent money. This gets up to a decent profit. Of course, you're going to get times where you go back to normal. You're going to get times where you go back, or perhaps you only risk 2X or whatever. So the point is leverage on your gains when the time is right. Push the pedal down, take the risk, because that is the only way to jump from a small account to a large account. You can't plod along grinding, making 1%, 1%, 1%. You can, but it's not enough, is it? It's not enough to make it feasible for you, even if you've got a medium account. You know, you've got to have a large account for that to make sense. Otherwise, you're putting all that effort in, all that energy in. Unless, of course, the caveat to that is that later on, once you've proven yourself, you're going to stick in a larger sum of money to make it more worthwhile. If that's not the case, which is not the case for most people, they've got a small account and that's it. Once you've proven to yourself, at some point, you will then know. You're going to know when your best trading opportunities are, all the kind of things that you've learned through that several year period. And then you're going to say, you know, at some point you might say, you know what, this is the trade that I risk 10X on. This is the trade that I do risk 10% of my account on. And people are going to go, I'm going to go scream when they watch this. You can't risk 10% of the account. Listen, you can do what you want in trading. If you want to risk 10% of the account, you risk 10% of the account. But you make sure that that is a time when you think you are right. You think that everything you've learned, and not just gut, experience, this is the right conditions for me, this is the right setup, I've been waiting for this, I feel good, I'm in tune with it, I've got some profit, I'm prepared to risk all the profit I've made from the last year or the last 6 months to give me that big boost in the next basket of trades that's going to put me to the next level. And if I'm wrong, I'm back to where I was. It doesn't really matter, I haven't made that much money really, it's not that meaningful, that amount, because it was a small account. But if I'm right, and I 5 times that, all of a sudden I'm 50 times where I was there. Now we're talking, now we've got a big boost. We've taken a small account and we've really started to give it a boost. We then plod along again, we cruise, then when we spot the right opportunity, we smash it again with big risk. And yes, from time to time that's going to catch you out and you're going to get caught out on that and it's going to be back to where you were. But if you're in tune with the market, if you're in tune with who you are as a trader, if you've got the right strategy, every now and then you get this, you can find you make quite a few leaps. And if you're really aggressive, you start multiplying that number, and before you know it, your account has an extra couple of zeros on the end of it, and then you can go back to taking less risk or go shoot for the moon. Or you can go back to taking less risk and say, hey, you know what, this is now a decent sized account, I can trade as I was, not so risky, not so speculative, and still make a decent money out of it. So that's kind of my way of trading a small account. Again, no advice here at all, disclaimers, read it please, because this is seriously risky, but it's the only way that you're really going to get into a large account, and just by pure maths, you're not going to be able to do it just by doing your 1%, because in the real world, okay, it sounds great if you're getting that every time you do it, but you're going to have times where you lose money. You have a drawdown, and then you start back to where you were and you plod back up again, you have a little bit of a drawdown, and you just haven't got the time with that small amount to make it into a large account. If it's just because you want to make a little bit of money, that's fine, but if you want to grow it into a large account, at some point, you're going to have to take the risk.